When I think of the word skepticism, I think of what Webster says about it, an attitude of doubt. I was raised by my folks, and frankly by a lot of my teachers, to have an attitude of doubt. And I think with what America has gone through over the last few years and what the world has gone through, we should lift skepticism up and honor it. I think that in many ways our founding fathers in this country were skeptical of a continued life under British rule without adequate representation. I think skepticism led the way to Abraham Lincoln's decision-making regarding the possibility of a divided nation surviving. Throughout my life, skepticism has never been really a dirty word. It's been a word to be elevated. It represents an attitude of doubt. I don't think that means you have to be a jaded cynic, but it means that you get to think for yourself. Over the last week, 3 articles sort of jumped out at me that I wanted to discuss because I think that these articles give credence and give power and give authority and give justification for all of us to be a little skeptical. I've made it very clear that I think that there is a triad of big government and big tech and big pharmacy that when combined, the impact on our lives and on our freedoms is enormous. When I think of the First Amendment and I think of freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of religion, freedom to assemble, freedom to petition, it seems to me like in each one of these freedoms, skepticism is elevated and honored. So let's talk about these 3 articles. Let's go back to September 11th, the Los Angeles Times, article written by Corinne Pertil. Title of the article was Controversial Law Punishing Doctors Who Spread COVID Misinformation on Track to be Undone. Well, before I jump into it, I would like to say one thing. I am shocked at how careless journalists and media and news broadcasters, as well as scientists and educators, have been regarding the difference between misinformation and disinformation. These 2 words are enormously different. When I told my patients for years that they shouldn't eat too many eggs because it might raise their cholesterol, and then later on, the medical profession and the scientific community learned that this wasn't necessarily the case, that avoiding eggs didn't necessarily provide the security and the protection and the lowering of the cholesterol that we had maybe subscribed to earlier. When I backed off and told my patients, I think you can eat eggs, I was arguably guilty of spreading misinformation way back when. And now I tried to correct it. And if in 20 years we find out that once again we shouldn't eat eggs, then that would be more misinformation. But never was it disinformation. Never was it a deliberate use of half-truths or falsehoods to try to get you to think in a way that doesn't make sense. There was no deliberate attempt to deceive you. Disinformation focuses on deliberate. Misinformation is simply that which you thought on a Monday might be proven to be wrong by a Friday. And on Friday, you would look back on Monday's information and you'd say, that was unintentional misinformation. How many years have doctors told patients an aspirin a day keeps the doctor away? Take a baby aspirin every day. Once you hit 40, it would be good for you. We don't say that anymore. Now we look at it a little bit more nuanced. We still have recommendations to make regarding aspirin in diabetics or aspirin in people who have a diagnosis of coronary artery disease or have had stents or have had heart attacks. But we arguably did spread misinformation way back when we told you that when you turn 40, put that aspirin bottle in the front of your medicine cabinet. So let's get back to the article, Los Angeles Times. Controversial law punishing doctors who spread COVID misinformation. Folks, physicians have to be able to be wrong. We are wrong all the time on diagnoses, on recommendations for what chemotherapy regimen might work best for someone's cancer. Arguably, I know you don't want to hear this, But I'll let you in on a little secret. We kill people. We're not proud of it, but we do. Some of our intentions, some of our evaluations, some of our exhaustive workups, using contrast material, knocking out kidneys, we actually do kill people, but always with the best of intentions. So don't, please don't, hold us responsible. That's our argument. That's what we say. And the only way we're going to stop some of those unnecessary iatrogenic, which means caused by the healer, deaths, is for you to be doubtful, assertive, and comfortable with being skeptical. I want to say this really clear. Skepticism in this day and age, with physicians having abandoned their patients, with big tech having so much control over your lives, and big government in bed with big tech, more than ever, skepticism is your best friend. So here's the Los Angeles Times article. This was an article, a senior attorney, Chessie Thatcher, with the ACLU of Northern California, says this: "We are happy that the legislature is attempting to address the defects in last year's legislation." So what happened? Let's unpack this. Well, last year, California legislature, they were hot on the trail. They were going to punish doctors who spread misinformation. Not to make a distinction with disinformation. No, that would require too much precision. No, they were just going to willy-nilly go forging straight ahead, and they were going to teach these doctors who were saying things that didn't align with the conventional narrative. It was called AB 2098. That was the name of the bill. It applied to conversations between patients and their doctors about the patient's care. It was endorsed by the California Medical Association. But Governor Gavin Newsom expressed some unease about the bill's wording in his September 2022 signing statement. Now, that's a year ago. September 2022, we're in September 2023, writing that he was, quote, concerned about the chilling effect, end quote, of legislating doctor-patient conversations. Well, a preliminary injunction in January in two related cases challenged the law's constitutionality. Judge William Shub of the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of California ruled that the law's, quote, unclear phrasing and structure, end quote, could have a, quote, chilling effect, end quote. Going forward, basically, the law is going to be undone. It's been sort of tucked into a bigger law, and Dr. Monica Gandhi, an infectious disease specialist at the University of California, San Francisco, said, "We do not need an extra bill in this state to regulate medical practice. I think it is prudent to repeal this bill." I wonder what the authors of the bill think. Well, let's check out what the article says. Los Angeles Times. Assemblyman Evan Lowe, Democrat, one of the bill's original authors, also seemed unbothered by the fact that AB 2098 was going to go away. His gobbledygook statement was, "Fortunately, with this update, the Medical Board of California will continue to maintain the authority to hold medical licensees accountable for deviating from the standard of care and misinforming their patients about COVID-19 treatments." Folks, the Los Angeles Times has a headline article basically saying that the California legislature is going to walk this one back. Other articles, other newspapers across California talked openly about the embarrassment that the legislators should feel about that bill. Next article, a day later, September 12th, Fox News, Brooke Singman, Fox News, title, "Whistleblower alleges CIA offered officials money to change view of COVID origins." Do you remember, if you were skeptical about the origin of the COVID-19 virus, if you said anything other than natural zoonotic phenomenon involving multiple species, if you dared to think that this had anything to do with that virology lab located in Wuhan, oh, by the way, located within half a mile of the Wuhan lab, the wet market, if you had any thoughts other than conventional narrative, you were a conspiracy theorist. Remember that? So here's what the Fox News says. a CIA whistleblower told Congress that the agency, the CIA agency, offered officials on a team investigating COVID-19 origins significant monetary incentive to change their positions from that it originated out of a leak from the Wuhan lab to, quote, unable to determine, end quote. So let's unpack this just a bit. In Congress, the House Coronavirus Subcommittee Chairman, Brad Wenstrup, and the House Intelligence Committee Chairman, Mike Turner, sent to the CIA and a former official letters that Fox obtained. Here's what it says. The whistleblower told Congress that the CIA assigned 7 officers to a COVID discovery team, which consisted of multidisciplinary and experienced officers with significant scientific expertise. According to the whistleblower, at the end of its review, out of those 7 members, 6 believed that intelligence and science were sufficient to make a low confidence assessment, they weren't certain, that COVID-19 originated from a laboratory in Wuhan, China. That's what Wenstrup and Turner wrote. The whistleblower further contended that of those 7 people on the team, 6 felt that there was evidence to indicate it came from a lab. 1, the person with the most seniority, did not believe the data produced that. So the whistleblower says the other 6 members were given a significant monetary incentive to change their position. Now, this was Fox News. It's this is no small podunk little source of news that you might say, well, they live on the 5-yard line somewhere and you should ignore it. This is Fox News, and there should be more reporting on this, but it's been remarkably quiet. But what does this article tell us? It tells us that a reasonable level of skepticism is reasonable. Then we go to Cornell, highly acclaimed college. They have a new dean, Bob Harrington. This was an article penned by Dr. Vinay Prasad, September 15th, 2023. Dr. Prasad is a well-regarded, highly distinguished physician. And this is what his title says in his Substack. Cornell's new dean, Bob Harrington, asked Dr. Jay Bhattacharya to stop talking to the press about COVID policy. So here we go. Dr. Jay Bhattacharya is an esteemed, highly acclaimed professor at Stanford. He's a physician, professor. He gave a first-person account of his treatment at Stanford. And here's what he says about Dr. Bob Harrington. At that time, Dr. Bob Harrington was the chair of medicine at Stanford. Now he's the dean at Cornell. He evidently got a promotion. He's not at Stanford now. This is what Dr. Jay Bhattacharya's first-person account said. Harrington emailed me demanding that I stop giving public interviews and stop talking with the press. This order was entirely inconsistent with Stanford's commitment to the free speech rights of professors. Harrington, the chair of the Department of Medicine, later apologized to me for overstepping boundaries with this order. He told me privately that his order came from someone above him in the university hierarchy. So you've got the chairman of medicine at Stanford getting his walking orders from above and going to someone like Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, who was one of the 3 authors of the Great Barrington Declaration. So in this article by Dr. Vinay Prasad, he goes on to say this. Consider the role of universities in the spring of 2020. If they wanted to be useful, they would have held a series of debates about what we were doing. School closures, shutting down playgrounds, banning people on beaches, business closure, lockdowns, masking, all could have had a series of Stanford debates. Yet no university did this. Not a single university had the courage to debate policy. The leaders were scared to host debates, scared of the mob response. You see, I've been speaking a lot lately about skepticism. And when I think of how our universities and our scientists, our academia failed us. They should have been leading the charge. In the same way that I, as a resident, when I was a resident in my residency after medical school and before I was out practicing independently, in the same way that Grand Rounds was a robust conversation, encouraging skepticism, encouraging thinking out of the box, encouraging us to consider that which might not have been considered because it could save lives. That's what I was taught, not just in my family of origin, being raised in mom and dad's home, but I was taught that in high school, I was taught that in college, I was taught that in medical school, and I was certainly taught that in my residency. And we as a nation have survived because we've been a skeptical nation until COVID. Our universities, our scientists, our professors, academia, they failed us. And to pile on to make it more difficult for us to be skeptical and think for ourselves, there was mainstream media, there was big tech, big government, big pharma squashing us. I'm giving this video talk today because I'll tell you right now, I think skepticism can be and should be your best friend. It can save your life when maybe nobody else will.